Grab your beverages and turn up your interweb. Solving the world's problems 12 ounces at a time. It's Dudes and Beer.
Well, hello everybody, and welcome to episode 182 182 of the Dudes and Beer podcast. I am Chris Jordan, your host. With me tonight is our good friend Billy Joe Kane from the Radical Empty Education Foundation here in Austin. They're a great company, 501c3 that does work with people who have been through human trafficking, victims of human trafficking, as well as their awesome game, Trapped, a VR detective story that kind of gives you the lowdown on what it is to be someone who has been human trafficked. And we'll get into some of that. Before we get into that, we have, of course, our weekly news of the week, which is always on our Dudes and Beer Facebook page. You can always go check it out. Some of the new headlines today are out of Fox News. A Chinese student has been accused of spying on U.S. engineers and defense contractors that he has been working with. Apparently, also out of local news, Cody Wilson from Defense Distributed has, of course, come back into the country. He put in his official resignation with Defense Distributed on Friday, and they actually just had a live press conference today that was on Facebook talking about that. That's up there. Trump's new limo cost $1.5 million and comes with a fridge full of his blood type. Actually, a fairly average cost for a presidential limousine. Those things are literally like shoulder-fired, missile-proof, all kinds of stuff. Like the technology inside of them is absolutely insane. There is a suspect arrested in the U.S. diplomat's death in Africa. Six Flags is actually holding a coffin challenge requiring guests to stay closed up in a coffin for 30 hours. Yale canceled some of its classes as law students protested Brett Kavanaugh's nomination. And I see a thumbs up from you. I'm absolutely down with people protesting. What do you think about the school shutting down classes for it, though?
Well, it's a fascinating question. But I mean, like when there are huge events like this that are happening in the national consciousness, I think Yale may need to kind of get some. They might need to clean themselves off a little bit.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm getting at.
Yeah, and I was the same way.
Supporting their students is really cool. I mean, they could get those guys just shut out.
I think it's great, but at the same time, like I'm sure that there's quite a number of students who didn't go to protest.
Can't argue about that.
And kind of like I answered my wife, who was like, I support this. This is great. And I was like, but that's kind of bullish on behalf of the university. Like, that's cool if that's their political belief. But now, because of their political beliefs, some other kids aren't getting the class that they were supposed to get that.
That's a very, very valid point.
And
I've been that kid trying to rough my way through school. And schedule mattered.
I was the kid that went to college for many, many years, switched majors numerous times, and people saw me at like midterms and went, "Whoa, you're in this class?" And I'm like, "Yep." That was me. So that's the point of view I come from is like, hey, there may have, like, I was the dude that skipped class all the time. What if
you're right. There's no defense of that. That's absolutely true. I guess the question is whether you feel that it's important enough. And I could see why some people wouldn't.
Yeah. And, I utterly respect.
I still approve of it.
I approve anybody going and protesting as long as you are pulling a peaceful protest, doing things properly, and you're protesting the right thing. They do seem like
they're doing a really good job sitting quietly.
Absolutely.
It's as respectful as you can get because you're physically protesting, letting people know that you care.
Yeah, precisely. And we have to do that in this society. I mean, hell, that's what this show is all about, is having those hard discussions.
Yep.
We have to be willing and open-minded enough to have them and to see other people's point of views.
Nothing's black and white in this world.
No, it isn't.
Tons of shades of gray, and you just have to try to, work your way through it. And if you can listen and change your mind, even better. Shameless
plug. Coming soon will be Gray Matters Radio with Michael Devine on the HC Universal Network. That is being built right now. Everything is going on. everything's being put together, but it's basically a show about that. It's about like exploring those in-between areas of topics, specifically with politicians, doctors, all that kind of stuff, psychologists, what is it that's driving our society to these extreme polarizations?
Yeah, it's where you need to get to the point where you're actually questioning someone's like core beliefs.
Yeah.
Because it's like that's the part where they get really angry, that fight or flight.
Well, and really, before
trying to open up their minds to different options.
It's the fact of before you question somebody else's, you really need to question yours.
Yeah, that seems like a really good show.
It's gonna be some good stuff. I'm really excited. The last story that we're going to cover, which will kind of lead us into topic here in just a second, is out of the Telegraph UK. Scientists discover how to upload knowledge to your brain. This is all of the Matrix, folks. They can actively excite parts of your brain, and through like getting the electrodes on your brain whenever you're doing the activity, they can basically reverse it and activate the same neurons in your brain in somebody that hasn't done that activity, and slowly teach them activities.
Wow.
Crazy stuff.
Well, we all know it's going to happen.
It is. It is.
These are just the first steps.
And before it happens, let's get to this week's waiver wire with our good friend Matthew McPhee.
Dudes and beer fans, what is up? This is Matt McPeak from the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football Podcast, giving you the Week 4 waiver wire segment. We got 2 teams on bye this week, Panthers and Redskins, plus we got Jimmy Garoppolo going down with an ACL tear. So anybody that's been playing Cam Newton or Alex Smith or Jimmy Garoppolo, you're going to have to replace those guys this week. And I think no better quarterback replacement this week than Baker Mayfield. Came into the game halfway through the game for an injured Tyrod Taylor, put up 200 yards, looked very comfortable. The offense looked really good with him. He drove them down on 4 straight scoring drives. And last week, the Oakland Raiders gave up 289 passing yards and 3 touchdowns to Ryan Tannehill. So I like Baker Mayfield this week. Another quarterback that I think you can stream this week is Andy Dalton. He is in Atlanta. He had the 4 interceptions last week, but he's got 8 touchdowns through 3 games so far, and he had 350 passing yards last week. So we just saw Atlanta get into a shootout with Drew Brees and the New Orleans Saints. I think with the injuries in Atlanta on defense, you're going to see that team in a lot of shootouts this year, and I think this week against the Bengals will be no different. The last quarterback that you could stream, I think, is Case Keenum. And this is solely because of who they're playing. They got Kansas City coming to Denver. Kansas City has looked amazing so far this season with Patrick Mahomes at quarterback. It should be a shootout there, and that's why I think Case Keenum is worth playing if he's available. Let's go to running back. So for Chris Ivory, we saw LaShawn McCoy get injured last week. He had some cracked rib cartilage, and Ivory came in this week and got 23 touches and put out 126 total yards. I think this coming week against Green Bay, I think he can do the same thing. So far this season, Green Bay allowed 100 total yards to Jordan Howard. They allowed 90 total yards to Dalvin Cook and 5 yards per carry to Latavius Murray in week 2. Plus, last week we just saw Adrian Peterson beat them up for 120 yards and 2 touchdowns. So I like Chris Ivory this week. Another good waiver wire pickup at running back can be Kerryon Johnson. We saw for the first time in years a 100-yard rusher in Detroit. He had 16 carries, 100 yards, caught 2 or 3 targets for 9 yards. Dallas so far this year allowed 95 total yards to McCaffrey in week 1, over 100 yards to Saquon Barkley in week 2. And just last week against Seattle, 32 attempts and 100 yards plus a touchdown for Chris Carson. So I think Kerryon Johnson is falling into the lead back role there in Detroit, and I think you can play him this week. The third, and it pains me to say this, is Buck Allen again. He's got Pittsburgh this week. I think he's more playable in a PPR league than in a standard league because he's only averaging 2 yards per carry. He's averaging 9 touches a game. It's not that great, but as long as they keep giving him the ball on the goal line and these stupid fullback dives, he's going to have value. So let's go to receiver. Calvin Ridley, oh man, 3 touchdowns this past week on 7 catches and 146 yards. The week before that, in week 2, he had 4 catches for another touchdown. So he's definitely becoming very much involved in the pass game down there in Atlanta. Tyler Boyd had another good game. This game was a lot better than week 2, but back-to-back weeks with six catches and a touchdown. This past week, he had 132 yards. Those 2 teams are playing each other this week, Cincinnati and Atlanta. So, like I said earlier, I think that could be a shootout, and those 2 receivers should benefit from that. And the third wide receiver that I think you can stream is Mike Williams. We saw him this past week in a tough matchup against the Rams. He scored 2 touchdowns.
Done it, and he fired me from ever coming over there to see my friend ever again. I was like, don't you want to know before you put it up?
Right? And that is the waiver wire for this week. There was a little bit more of that. It got cut off. Sorry about the technical difficulties. But please, please, please make sure to go on tonight onto ESPN.com if you're in the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football League. Take care of your waiver wire. Our good commissioner and host of the Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football podcast there, Matthew McPeak, with some great advice on what to do this week while you're taking care of your team. Make sure to tune in to the official Dudes and Beer Fantasy Football podcast every Thursday morning on dudesandbeer.com. You can also catch it on our free app. You can also download the HC Universal Network app and catch it there or at hcuniversalnetwork.com. So now that is finished. That's a deep breath and having to get ready to like spiel it out there whenever you're closing something. But the topic of transhumanism is something that has fascinated me for years and years. And just to give you a little back history, folks, Max Moore was one of the fathers of the concept of transhumanism back in the 90s. And here's a quote from him. Transhumanism is a class of philosophies of life that seek the continuation and acceleration of the evolution of intelligent life beyond its current human form and human limitations by means of science and technology, guided by life-promoting principles and values.
There's a part in there that I really liked, which is it says, beyond its currently human form.
Yes.
Because they're looking that far into the future.
Yeah.
That's spooky.
Yeah.
And it's going to happen.
Well, and it is already happening. It is already happening.
Very
And we
true.
were talking about that a little bit before show. This is off of whatistranshumanism.org, folks. That's where that quote from Max Moore came from, right there on their homepage. Part 1 is the intellectual and cultural movement that affirms the possibility and desirability of fundamentally improving the human condition through applied reason, especially by developing and making widely available technologies to eliminate aging and greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and physiological capacities. The second part of this is the study of the ramifications, promises, and potential dangers of technologies that will enable us to overcome fundamental human limitations, and the related study of the ethical matters involved in the developing and using of such technologies. So it's interesting that even within their own definition of transhumanism, they've kind of put a caveat and a check in there that, okay, we're going to explore the ethics
I was thinking
behind
about
this
that too.
as well.
That was the part that I was thinking about as the
Mhm.
definition was really kind of rolling by, because it's like,
Yeah.
we're going to do it, but on those certain things, well, probably on everything we have to ask that question: should we do it?
Yeah. Yeah.
I wonder
And-
who defines those ethics?
Well,
right?
and it really is the fact of what do you do with that? What do you do once the technology exists? And with our rapidly evolving technology now, I mean, as it is right now, even if you talk to Arshawn McCleskey, our security advisor here on the show, from UT Center for Identity, there is no actual definition of identity in the United States for online use. You go to the EU, you go abroad to Asia, there's a pretty specified definition of what your identity is online.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Our definition is so broad, it's almost not a definition. It's really scary and horrifying, which is why all of these companies get away with selling your private data, stuff like that. It's technically their commodity, not necessarily your private data. Once you've given it to them, they have right to sell it. And to go into that a little bit is the idea of whenever my wife and I moved into our rent house, she brought back change of address forms. And I was like, yeah, I'm all set. I'll let our debtors know where we live.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to fill out a change of address form. She was like, why not? I was like, because the post office sells your data. Like, they actively sell lists of addresses and stuff like that.
I believe it.
So,
did you ever hear of that company called Outbox? They what they would do is they would literally collect your mail, and they would take it to their machines, and they would scan it and email it to you. It was like the greatest thing ever. I knew that there's tons of security issues or whatever. They did the best they could to say it was better than the employees. Anyway, the point is, they took the technology after they worked it out to the U.S. Postal Service, and they said, "Look, we can get rid of junk mail. No one will ever need it again." They said,
No.
you would destroy our business model out," and that was the
Yeah.
end. That was the end of that whole service.
Yep. Check your mail daily, folks, and that's 3/4 of it is circulars, flyers, things like that.
It is. It has. They have let it be known that is exactly their business model.
Yep, precisely. And just to delve into that for a second, even a prime example of security, safety, things like that. I'll divulge the fact I've had a Bank of America account for years. I had my business account with them until the day that I woke up one day and I had like $100 service fee or something like that for overdrafts and service fee because I didn't have over $500 in my business account.
Yeah.
And it was like, okay, great. When did that policy change? Because that was not a thing when I opened my account. And they just kind of changed it without letting me know.
I think they mail you something physical
And then-
that's in like 1 point,
And
1 point fonts.
And then they proceeded to start giving me fees on my free checking. And
That's
it was like,
awesome.
but that's free checking. It was well, yeah, we don't offer that anymore. But
At least it wasn't Wells Fargo.
I've had them.
They have done
the one
so
that-
many things to their
The
customers.
one that got me this last week was my mom went to put cash into my Bank of America account.
I don't think they let anybody do that anymore.
They don't, apparently,
You
as
cannot-
of January.
Right.
And what is that about? Like, what?
They want to know your identity when you drop the money off.
How is that possibly like? They were like, well, it's for your protection. I'm like, I really don't think so. It's my mother. I gave her my number for this purpose.
How about this? Just put the money in.
Yeah,
like, that's money.
If they're
Somebody's
coming to
giving
take money out,
Yeah, that's a
by
different
all
story.
means, check
Yeah.
it.
Exactly.
But if somebody's coming to put money into my account, just let them put the cash in, bro.
I was shocked by the same thing.
Yeah.
One time.
It blew my mind. And some banks with their business accounts still allow it,
I believe.
but not with personal accounts. And that was one of those that just blew my mind when I heard it. To kind of loop back to transhumanism here and the concept of security and checks and balances, the
and
idea
your ownership of your own data, which
the ownership of your own personal identity.
Yep.
There has been so much work done recently in the realm of, I guess, quantum computing and human brain exploration, where the identity lies to begin with, whether or not we can download an identity to a computer. And at that point, do you cease to exist? There's even been a recent, I know, not necessarily court case, but new rules within union contracts for Hollywood actors because of this new Adobe software. That as long as you have 15 minutes of somebody speaking,
Yeah, you got it.
you can type anything you want, and that person's voice will say it.
I know that their contracts basically say, the old contracts said any type of representation of them forever and ever. And obviously, at the time they had written that, they weren't expecting it to be done in a computer.
Exactly.
So got Bogart or whoever on a commercial.
Like, you can use clips, but here's the same thing. Like, you can digitally make that person when they're 15 and then use their voice.
Yeah.
You know? So they literally had to go through and alter contracts to assure the fact that these digital personalities, should they appear in movies, that their families get the money from the royalties.
That's a dang good thing.
Yeah, but that's some of the checks and balances that have to go into this kind of stuff. And
I see your point.
The ethics behind transhumanism is where it gets interesting, and even them saying the study of the ramifications, promises, and potential dangers of technologies. I was showing you earlier. Go check it out, folks. Just Google transhumanism statue, and you'll see the statue from the 2013 Bilderberg conference that is just absolutely creepifying. It looks like the Terminator crawling out of the magma. You know, just absolutely crazy looking stuff. But the whole concept of man meets machine. You were talking earlier before the show that your wife herself is actually a cyborg.
Yeah, she is.
Explain a little bit of it.
So she has intractable migraines. We tried everything in the universe, neurologists to everything. And there was this thing up in Dallas that we had been following as a experimental procedure. Basically, they implant a TENS, TENS unit under your skin subdermally. And then they run a wire up around your skull and implant it in 4 different places. It's very similar to something that they would use for pain. And what happens is this electrical current that's underneath your skin is kind of like licking a 9-volt battery, except on a long cable. And it basically short circuits the migraine. You're still having it. So if you're going to throw up, you'll still physically throw up. But it does a pretty good job. And I guess the point is that it's completely subdermal. Nobody knows she has it on.
Yeah.
She has to charge it through the skin and control it through a paddle. You know, sorry, on top of the skin. But yeah, she's already a cyborg.
Yeah, and these kind of things
because she's melded with that thing.
Yep.
She needs it all the time.
Yeah,
that's kind of why it's not just a. Well, I don't know. I guess there's anything else that gets implanted. I guess maybe except for like birth control pill or birth control implants. Yeah, if those things function with your body and you can make it do stuff. I guess that.
Yeah, they have the new diabetes control technology where it's just a patch and you have a pack that reads your blood sugar regularly and disperses your insulin.
Fits the description.
You know. So it's interesting to see stuff like that and see things that, as per the definition, are enhancing mankind, are making us better, are helping us health-wise, things like that. The curious part comes when you start talking about strange things, like in the Wired article, and I'm trying to see when it was actually put out here, but there's an awesome Wired article about meet the transhumanists turning themselves into cyborgs. And one of the parts, Neil Harbison is a self-declared cyborg who corrected his color blindness by implanting a prosthetic sensor in his skull that converts colors into sound waves. So he actually hears the frequency of the color blue and yellow and green
out of control.
Things like that. And has learned to see color through the interpretation of sound.
And he says they also can see ultraviolet and infrared. So he perceives things that we cannot.
Yeah. So that's one that's
an enhancement.
Sure. That's absolutely enhancing things. And even earlier tonight, we were talking about the Olympic Committee during the last Olympics, talking about. I'm trying to remember where the runner was from with the prosthetic leg. But the runner with the prosthetic leg, whether they were handy capable or whether or not they actually had an advantage over other runners because they had one leg that was lighter. They had. You're right about that. One thing I would be thinking about is the speed, but when you have that much weight that's off your body,
you can definitely move it faster.
Yeah. And, of course, it takes some incredible training to be able to
Not a doubt.
even reteach yourself to run with a regular prosthetic or even with a prosthetic at Olympic speed.
Absolutely.
That in and of itself is incredible. And I think especially the technology that was used helped that to a great regard as far as stroke, impact on the body, things like that. So that's definitely something to be considered, even with the current state of exoskeleton technology that's going on.
It's happening.
There is some pretty incredible stuff out there right now that is like straight up out of Alien. That's pretty wild.
I saw this thing that was a really thin, flexible material that people would wear, and it actually helps you stand up and sit down, and basically kind of functions as an exterior muscle.
Yeah, and you actually shared the article. I know I posted it a few months ago about the new exoskeleton chip that is helping paraplegics walk, things like that.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself is an implant in their spinal column that allows them to communicate with the exoskeleton. And when you're talking about that, yeah, you do have to wonder about, I guess, what would be some of the ethical quandaries involved with that?
Well, I mean, obviously it can be weaponized.
Sure.
I would think that would definitely be an ethics question. I really don't know. If you're helping somebody to be able to walk, I mean, what's the bad part of that?
Yeah. I don't see that as an issue. Of course, most of these programs do come out of DARPA. The Defense Initiative,
pre-weaponization idea phase. Of the military.
And even now we have the Future Force here in Austin now. Go Future Force!
Yeah.
The new military arm of the cyber war,
right,
here in Austin, taking care of microwave weapons and wireless weapons, drone technology, all robotics, all kinds of stuff.
Well, they are in the right place.
Absolutely.
Tech, hardware. I do want to say, though, that I do like DARPA for the good things that it does.
I do. Same here.
They're really allowing people to explore ideas that wouldn't be able to be funded any other way.
I really kind of see DARPA almost like I see Area 51.
That is a fascinating contrast.
Where although it's much more public. Area 51 is basically a bunch of defense contractors, things like that, in one spot working on ultra-secret weapons, planes, reverse engineering things,
True.
All kinds of stuff.
That's my understanding.
Be it earthly or not. That's
a different show.
That's the case. It totally did. That was 2 weeks ago.
That's why you're all fresh on the info.
And much the same way, DARPA is a bunch of defense contractors. Everything else, developing this technology. Some of their stuff. I'm trying to remember the name of the dog, the walking dog that can now open doors.
Oh,
it can now. It
that's
can
from
now.
Boston Dynamics.
Yeah, and it funded the DARPA
stuff.
program.
That stuff is spooky.
Yeah, and they actively showed it defending itself against somebody with a broom that was trying. It grabbed the broom and threw it away and opened the door and took off.
At some point, it has nothing to do with the hardware.
Yeah.
It'll have to do with the software.
Well,
and who can hack it. And
that's just it. I think is the deep learning concept. I'm getting ready to go work a huge. Cannot say the name of the conference. In another state that is all about deep learning and things like that. It's absolutely amazing. It blows my mind every year when I go work it because it's one of those wow, these are the nerds. These are dudes that are designing the chips that do deep learning.
Well, they take a lot of that stuff and they, for example, they have airplanes now that can crush any regular pilot.
Yeah.
So it's like.
And that is actively one of the articles that I shared with you that I shared in the post for tonight was out of Defense One. and it came out a couple weeks ago where we can now actively control drones with our mind.
Yep.
With an actual like helmet with sensors.
What gets me here is it's like the surgically implantable microchip.
Yeah.
Whoa.
Yeah, exactly.
So she's piloting it with her mind.
Yep. And the new version of the F-35 actually has like a drone swarm that can be released to jam radar, do all kinds of things. So whenever you take into consideration Justin Sanchez, the director of DARPA's Biological Technology Office, saying, as of today, signals from the brain can be used to command and control not just one aircraft, but 3 simultaneous types of aircraft. So imagine
they have like smart missiles, then they have brilliant missiles, and so this is like basically brilliant control. You can control 3 things at once and work together.
This is basically now your heads-up display tracks your eye, and you say fire, and it's already tracking that target. You can focus on something else.
Wow! So they don't have to do the external, what do you call it? Eye tracking. It's internal.
Yeah.
That's really
There's no need for an infrared laser to keep track of your eye. There's no need for eye tracking technology. It straight up reads your brain.
That is some next level stuff.
Yeah, it is. It is. And granted, I want to get one of the little beta readers. You can get them. They're like the Star Wars Force trainers that actively read your alpha waves.
And there's been a lot of that stuff for quite some time,
Yeah.
But that is what they're talking about there is just beyond.
Well, and for years...
beyond what I've seen so far.
For years, I've used binaural beat machines. I have a binaural dream machine that's like, headphones with the beats, with glasses that sync up to it.
Right.
Stuff like that. I've used that for years for brain entrainment, for even in my music to get certain emotions, get certain expected results out of the music, and to get even one track that I made for my son before he was born that not only incorporated his prenatal heartbeat, but also incorporated like deep theta and delta waves for like deep relaxing sleep and vivid dreaming, that kind of stuff.
Sounds like I need some really great earbuds to sleep with.
Yeah. And we know that kind of stuff can be done. We know that you can even entrain the brain through frequencies. You can train the brain through light pulses, all kinds of stuff. So to know
I'm sure
that
DARPA's working on that
to know that we can actively control other devices with our brain now, is pretty phenomenal technology, and at the same time, I think rabbit hole wise, pretty dangerous.
I'm thinking about somebody hacking in and having their pilots, take over my drones.
I'm thinking,
just as an example.
I'm thinking the fact of it's a radio wave.
Anything being transmitted.
How long before the transmitter's the receiver?
Yeah, basically.
It's not hard.
I don't want to alarm anyone, obviously, but when you see other countries that are trying to graduate computer engineers at a greater, I say computer engineers, but anything having to do with science, technology, programming, etc., when they're working at that like as a national effort, there's an interesting future coming. Yeah,
and it's I mean, in and of itself, China all of about 5 years ago dropped its child policy. It was like we've done the metric math, and we will eventually not have enough people to sustain our industry and our economy. We won't have enough people to fill jobs.
Right.
Just at the rate that industry is growing and technology is growing.
Well, they're cranking them out.
And, just to think about that in lines with transhumanism and what some people would say is the transhumanist agenda, the plan to move man beyond the point of physicality, the plan of being able to, like I said, though we can control the drone, how long before the drone can control us?
That's the time. That's the question.
And it's only a step away at that point. Once you can control the physical object, it's not that hard to be able to control the person controlling the physical object.
We should just make sure we have a lot of robots that can build things, and then give sentience to the ones that have been built.
Well, and I think therein lies one of the ethical dilemmas. And of course, tying that concept in with Reef, with the Radical Empathy Education Foundation, hashtag Reef Cares, y'all.
It is.
Go check that out. But in Houston, I don't know. I think I shared the article with you. The first sex robot brothel was getting ready to open up. And you do have to kind of wonder. Number one, yeah, it does kind of normalize the concept of dehumanization to begin with.
I think that's probably the single most important topic of that entire, I guess, discussion or situation or business. I'm not exactly sure what you call it, but the fact that you are going to be having a relationship, so to speak, or relations with an inanimate object, and even if it was animate, it's not human. It just doesn't have the spiritual, psychological connection that you would with a human being, which is... Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No. Keep going.
So that seems to be the theme that I hear from the people that are not necessarily complaining about it, but the ones that are actually bringing up that this is important. And a lot of the sex workers say that a lot of their work has to do with that human element. So I mean,
it does.
And I just want to go ahead and state for the record that there are legal sex workers.
There are.
And they and their income and salary and their relationships they have with their customers, they're very important. So I mean, I'm only speaking, to and for the legal sex workers, and that seems to be their biggest complaint, that they're worried about literally the dehumanization of relationships like that.
Yeah, and that should one of these people who has been frequenting a location like that come to their doorstep, that they may actively be in danger because of that dehumanization, because of that concept that I'm used to a robot.
It's I haven't looked at the studies, but there's a body of work that says that pornography is really messing up kids, and then as they get older, they become less sensitized to things, eventually possibly leading to ED. So sure. I'm not going to stand here and say I've read the research, but that is a theme that is going on in that research.
I can.
And if you tack on,
I can't quote the research. I can't quote the studies, but I can tell you that I've heard the same studies.
Right.
Because
so you kind of tack on, not just having, pornography at your home by yourself. Then you go out and see a human.
It goes right along with people who have magazines like Maxim or Vogue in their house, and people who don't.
Women in those magazines are not humanized.
Well, and it's the fact of it's the expectation of something that is not realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I've done a lot of work with people with mental illness, and I work and volunteer at places like that. So I mean, there's a probably a larger percentage than we would want to think about people that are mentally ill, and these kind of things are not good inputs for people with those type of issues.
No,
so it's kind of like you even if you just walk down the street and you see that, it normalizes that behavior. And it's
interesting that you bring that up because people with that penchant, people with that lean to their personality, when they are exposed to those things, can often go awry. Bad things can happen, and it just.
I mean, there's already so many mixed messages in our marketing, as it is. Trying to have a conversation with your children about that as they grow up, and teach them that no, women are not objects. Beer is also drank by fat old guys.
That's right.
So it's like,
Right.
when you normalize
Most
having
people
sex
who
with a
drink
doll,
beer are not the most interesting person in the world.
no matter what beer they drink, right?
That's right.
But I really tried to listen the best I could to the sex workers that were in the articles, and their concern about the human element of the job that they do is really important. And I've spoken to a number of people of all different persuasions, and one of the things that I also heard as a theme was that this isn't legal sex work is not always about sex.
No,
sometimes it's about just listening to them and letting them air out.
I have known more than one escort of more than one persuasion. Yeah, and that is absolutely the case. Most of the people that they worked with, that they dealt with, were literally somebody that they got together with and talked about things that they could talk about with nobody else.
Yeah, I mean, we have people that are paraplegic. They just need a human being to come in and talk to them and be with them. Yeah, I mean, what's wrong with that? Yeah. My daughter was telling me that they're cuddlers, people that you can pay to come to your house and just basically hold you. Yeah. And human beings need to be held and touched and hugged. Yeah. Just at a basic primal level, to feel like a human.
Well, and that's one of the reasons why I titled this episode is Transhumanism, the End of Humanity. Are we getting to the point where we're willing and ready to shed a part of our coil as we know it? Do we really think that doing these things will lead to something better? For instance, there was a gentleman, a filmmaker, years ago, probably about 5-6 years ago now. I saw the PBS documentary with him in it where he had lost an eye. Okay. And actively had his eye replaced with a glass eye that looked similar but had an HD camera built into it.
I'm curious to find out how he got that input. So it's got the HD camera in it. Where does that input come out? Does he put it on glasses that it would like bounce back into his eye?
No. It's the fact that he can record his own point of view.
That
anywhere he goes
is super spooky.
As far as a filmmaker, like
I'm thinking beyond filmmaker. I'm thinking spies. I'm thinking people that they're like, okay,
and that was my whole issue with Google Glass, quite honestly.
That was kind of a spooky thing.
The concept of Google Glass to begin with, some of the Big Brother aspects behind it, and at least my own rabbit hole aspects.
Well, it seems like that does fit under the category of transhumanism.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
And I remember my wife's theater having to put a thing up saying like no Google Glass.
Yeah.
Because you don't know if somebody's like transmitting your show.
I went into I met
striptease. Gentlemen's establishments were putting things up. No Google Glass allowed.
I was at an ice cream place, if you will, with a friend of a friend who was wearing some Google Glass, and it was a very interesting experience to see how people reacted sociologically to that. So he let me wear them for a second, and it's like immediately people were suspicious of you.
Yeah.
Thankfully.
Yeah. Thank God.
Yes.
Because, and one of my big issues with it is there's only one way it's tracking your eye movements. And that's the fact that it's using an infrared laser.
And it's looking at you. If you think about it, it's like it is.
It's an infrared laser and a camera.
Of course.
That's the only way it can be done. Is either that or just with a camera tracking your eye movements.
Well, we already know that web designers use heat maps on screens. Yeah. So they try to figure out where your eyes go. Yeah. I mean, can you imagine the amount of data and parsing they could do to figure out what gets your attention as a human being?
Not just that.
In general.
Here's my rabbit hole. All right. Imagine the fact that much like any camera, you go to the doctor, they can walk off, put a little infrared laser on your finger, and come back and have your O2 content. They have your blood pressure. They have your pulse. They have everything about you right there.
Now I see where you're going.
Now, put that same thing in front of your eye.
Your eyes tell you a lot.
Everything. That's your entire identity. That's a biometric like that's an iris scan.
It's not only an iris scan, in my opinion. They can look and they can see what your blood pressure is. They can find out if you have any type of diseases. They can tell what kind of drugs you've been taking.
What?
Well, I mean, it's true.
Yeah. No, that's exactly where I was going.
That's not a rabbit hole, in my opinion.
Now,
those are actual facts.
Now imagine
whether they will or not is
much like the banks are talking about, like, oh, we're going to use iris scanning technology instead of your PIN card.
Now, iris scanning is not the gold standard. It's the distance between.
Oh, I'm with you.
Oh,
yeah,
you're going
the pupillary
there? Yeah.
distance.
But let's just say that they have that too, the best of the best.
Yeah.
Right.
At the same time,
Do you really want them to
that
have
same camera that's reading your iris can read your blood pressure,
Yes,
can
it
read
can.
what you're on, can read if you're drunk, can read your blood alcohol content, everything.
watch you
Can
drive
read
away
if you're
from the ATM.
agitated.
Yeah.
Can read if you're agitated. And be like, you know what? Sorry, we as your banking institution have noticed that you tend to come and withdraw $200 a couple times a week at like 2 a.m. after you've had quite a few beverages. We don't think that this is responsible spending habits.
There are AIs right now that do customer service, and
That
they
would
fire,
absolutely
they
do
fire
that.
customers.
Yes.
If that customer has been an a-hole for years. It's like, no, thank you. We don't want you as a customer anymore. And you're like,
good Lord, man, I'm going to be kicked off by computers everywhere.
that's what I'm saying. Is that ethical?
You know,
I don't know.
and you kind of have to wonder, especially with things like that, technology like that existing. Like I said, it's not a deep rabbit hole. It's not a tunnel of rabbit holes
Well, I mean,
there. That's
if
just
you-
scratching underneath the surface.
If you think about it, not so much from the corporate control. If you think about it as a user, if that's something that you have access to, which of course we will have access to that, just like we'll have a Google Glass that'll be plugged into our stuff. We know we will.
Yeah.
So then it's the question of you using that data. I watched this.
It's not an if, it's a when.
True. I watched this
With all of this
short
technology.
on YouTube one time. I think it was called Blink. I never can find it easily, but it's about a guy who he uses augmented reality to learn, watch a girl, or say, I guess I would say the date that he's on, to basically try to read what he should say for them. It's like he's a programmed, mouse, I guess. So he's basically trying to get what he wants by looking at micro expressions, etc. So,
Okay.
It's not just that the cameras are going to be facing
Yeah.
us. It's like we or some group of we are going to be able to look and see who in
Yeah.
the room is nervous, who in the room is going to,
and
whatever.
I told you whenever we spent the afternoon together, all of a month or so ago, that Amy and I have a concerted effort with our son to, though I share videos of him,
Sure.
pictures of him, I do not associate his name with him
I don't think that's a bad idea at all.
on social media, because we're putting a picture of his face up. That pupillary distance will never change. His facial metrics will never change. That's how all these Facebook algorithms where it's like, see yourself at 70. That's how it exists.
And if you think it's not creepy,
Yeah.
right? You think it's not an invasion of your privacy. The next time you look at something that says, "Hey, is this your name?" In a tagged photo,
Yeah.
it's like an algorithm figured out that's probably your name.
yeah.
Surely they had some
And-
stuff seeded because they have your
And
information.
I've
that's your
seen some
photo.
wild stuff at the conferences that I work. Just things where it's like walking by and it's live mapped, and as people walk by, it's basically capturing their facial expressions and putting a live emoji up above their head.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff.
But that kind of thing
And-
also kind of, if you think about it being from the outside, if that is part of your, I guess your transhumanist features, if you will, is that you can read people or you can display your own emojis. And that is going to be an interesting time.
Well,
really is.
and I think we're in
Good or bad.
we're in an interesting time, good or bad, with humanity to begin with. The whole Mayan prophecy works on the concept of 30,000-year cycles, and the fact that
it doesn't end; it just starts over, and you hit a new epoch, so to speak.
Yeah, exactly. And one epoch is the sun, the other is the moon. One is the advent of a technology, the other is the setting of the sun and the rising of the moon is the application of that technology. And right now we're in the midst of the application. That's what 2012 was the dawning of the application of this technology. And we're full on seeing it right now. One of the interesting articles that I actually put up was out of Stat News. Stat News, folks, just so you know, that is actually pretty much like the Forbes magazine of the medical industry. And the headline reads, "Resurrected."
Oh, I get it. Stat. Yeah, like hurry up. Stat. Okay.
Exactly.
Cute.
Yeah. Resurrected, a controversial trial to bring the dead back to life, plans to restart.
Get it? Back to life, restart.
Yeah.
Wow. Whoever wrote that title. Awesome job.
Brilliant. And it reads, in one study expected to launch later this year, scientists hope to use stem cells in a new, highly controversial way to reverse death. The idea of the trial, run by Philadelphia-based BioQuark, is to inject stem cells into the spinal cords of people who have been declared clinically brain dead. The subjects will also receive an injected protein blend, electrical nerve stimulation,
Yeah.
and laser
right.
therapy directed at the brain. The ultimate goal is to grow new neurons and spur them to connect and connect to each other,
Right.
and thereby bring the brain back to life. Quote, "It's our contention that there is no single magic bullet for this. So to start with, a single magic bullet makes no sense. Hence why we have to take a difficult approach," said Ira Pastor,
I read
CEO
that.
of BioQuark.
I read that,
Yeah.
and it seems like what they're saying is they're using 4 different techniques, like all at the same time.
Yeah.
Which is really difficult as a study, obviously.
Hard.
But I mean, that may be what it takes. You know,
And
They're looking at
granted,
resetting something that's organic matter.
I've gone and invited Ira to be a contact. Hopefully we will be able to get Ira on to talk about this kind of stuff, and to talk about exactly what BioQuark is all about. But here is their about page from BioQuark.com. BioQuark Inc. is focused on the development of novel biologics that have the ability to naturally modify the regulatory state of human tissues and organs with the goal of curing a range of chronic degenerative diseases as well as affecting complex regeneration.
So chronic, like death.
Sure.
Might as well-
Chronic.
might as well.
Chronic. Something that you ain't stopping.
Yeah, that's right. You're stuck with that one.
And just to kind of go with that for a minute, I remember when I posted that originally on Dudes and Beer, I put like, so apparently you've never seen a zombie movie. At least a modern day zombie movie where it's talking about things like that. Because, that's exactly how you get zombies, folks.
The combination of those 4 chemicals.
Yeah, and just to think that we are looking at technologies that will stop and they've already been able to genetically reverse the aging process in human cells. They've been able to
seen it in humans. I've seen it in other.
Yeah, they've been able to stop it at least. Whether or not it's reversible, they're still working on. But they've been able to fully stop the aging process.
Isn't that the end of the? Oh my God, I can't think of the name of the. Doesn't matter. Let me not worry about that. The listeners will be able to go. I'll look that up myself.
I'll Google that.
Yeah, exactly.
Google that for us. Come comment on it. And just thinking about that, like we were saying earlier, the ethics of that, the fact that fully fits, even though it's not electrical technology, microchip technology, nanotechnology, though we may be talking about nanomeds. We may be talking about even cellular regeneration through nanotechnology, that kind of thing. It still falls in the realm of transhumanism by extending human life and,
it's in the category.
process.
I think that as far as ethics goes, I think there's 2 different types of issues. One is, what does that add to people? And the other one is, for all the people that currently can't even eat,
Yeah.
how are they going to have access to something like that? And so it's the disparity between who can afford it and who can't afford it.
Oh,
and
yeah.
who lives longer and tells the story of, you know.
One of my favorite books ever is by Robert Heinlein. It's called Methuselah's Children. And
I have
of
some
course,
of the stuff I haven't read that
the reference to Methuselah, the oldest living person in the Bible, 900 something years. The concept that these people basically have enough money to go Highlander in life, and go through the Methuselah treatment and keep living and have to change identities and everything else as they move along through life.
There's a number of somewhat dystopian future novels.
Yeah. And, we really do have to wonder, number one, even with the current population growing as it is, do we need to start messing with the factors of death? We already have the longest life expectancy ever known to man, at least outside of anecdotal evidence.
True. Because, that is a rabbit hole.
Methuselah's anecdotal evidence, folks, okay?
There's beyond
Methuselah. There's beyond Methuselah. There's tons and tons and tons of literature out there.
I want to add something real fast for the listeners. Even if you think, or maybe the facts show that our ideas are out there, that doesn't mean that all of our ideas are bad.
No.
So that's something that a lot of people have seen. They're like, oh, if you dispute the JFK assassination results, then everything you say is bad.
Okay.
But I think the stuff that we're talking about today, for sure, is researchable.
And even yes, it's 100% researchable. Everything that we've talked about is 100% researchable.
Right.
But here's two huge questions that I would have to ask you in relation to this stuff. Number one, do you believe in the validity of conspiracy theory, and why?
Well, as I've heard, and I haven't really dug into this, the term conspiracy theory is something that was created by our intelligence agencies to kind of discredit people that may or may not know what really happened. So it's absolutely fascinating to see that. I'll just use an example, right? So I've been at some protests, and the official narrative is that something happened that no one that was there at the event can verify. But the message gets out there, and so that when you question the official narrative, you're labeled as the conspiracy theorist, right? And I see that constantly, and I'm again. I mean, I haven't been at Area 51 and met the aliens in person or anything.
I don't care,
but why would you? But I
wouldn't judge you if you believed in aliens and hadn't.
Yeah, I see conspiracy theories, so to speak, based upon people that first they discredit and then they actually turn over data that's irrefutable. And this concept of conspiracy theories, you can find that many of them have been proven as fact.
That's right.
Like we believe that the Iraq War was, a good thing, and it's like, nope, they absolutely made up the evidence.
They made up the babies in incubators.
Yep,
they made up all that stuff.
Again, go research it. Don't just take our words for it.
That's it. The Gulf of Tonkin, for prime example.
It just goes
come to find out, utter false flag actually exists.
That was a great suggestion. I was like, okay, listeners, go look up false flag.
Yeah,
and go look up how many of those were true.
Yeah.
So just
data. The sinking of the Gulf of Maine, or the USS Maine, not the Gulf of Maine.
So we were
USS Maine.
So we had jumped down the conspiracy theory question.
For me, it comes down for the fact I'm in the same camp as you. Number one, I cannot discount anything. If anything, I have become more of a proponent of using the word conspiracy hypothesis than theory.
I think that's a really great point.
Because we aren't to the point of theory yet. Well, we're at the point of hypothesis.
I have not thought about that. But I'll tell you what I think about that is that the term theory is scientific. What you mean scientifically is that you really have a handle on it.
That's right.
It's just not quite fact.
Exactly.
So when we say conspiracy theory, what we're doing is we're watering down the name,
And-
the word theory.
Yeah.
It's almost like that. is its
Hypothesis
own-
is still a working idea with very little evidence.
I think, I flipped my mind on the term homeless. I flipped it over to houseless because
Okay.
that's the truth.
Yeah.
So I think maybe I'm going to flip my conspiracy theory over to conspiracy hypothesis.
And my reasoning is this.
Hashtag conspiracy hypothesis.
That's it. Number one, theories exist. Otherwise, we would have no science. Conspiracies exist. Otherwise, we got to let a ton of people out of jail.
Yeah.
A ton of people. And if you think conspiracy theories don't exist, you have obviously never been on the receiving end of a prosecutor. Because that is specifically their job, is to spin a narrative of conspiracy, to spin a narrative of theory, to convince a jury.
A regular person. What is it? What is the thing? It's like beyond a reasonable doubt.
That's
So
only
that's
in
not-
murder.
Well,
That's only in
really,
yeah.
I did not know.
Oh
the
yeah,
distinction.
yeah. No, there's a big distinction between beyond a reasonable doubt and everything else. That's only in capital cases, beyond a reasonable doubt.
Wow, you mean
Yeah.
everything I've seen on television is wrong?
Yeah, dude. You
What?
assume the fact that every
seems like
time
a
you
co-
get arrested, they're going to Mirandize
That
you.
sounds like a
No.
conspiracy hypothesis
You're
to me.
actively being detained, not arrested, which is why the officer, when he pulls you over drunk, doesn't read you your rights. You get read your rights when you go before the judge. You have been detained, not arrested at that
All
point.
right, okay. So how do we turn that back into
Transhumanism and the
Is that
concept.
RoboCop that's arresting me?
Well, and it's the fact of conspiracy theory and transhumanism. Whether or not transhumanists are trying to convert us all and bring us to the point of understanding and wanting to be a part of technology, despite our human want to stay away from it, despite our animalistic ways. They're wanting to bring us into the digital age, wanting to merge us with machine, wanting to, even as some people like Nick Pope would say, prepare us for the coming invasion of the master race from outer space.
Okay, again, go look that up.
Conspiracy theories.
No, conspiracy hypotheses. So,
Hypotheses.
One of the things we were talking about before we went on air was that a lot of the things that you had just said, where we're blended with machine and connected together, it's already happened.
Oh, yeah.
We have cell phones, right?
Yeah.
So my cell phone right now, I do not use it, but if I say, okay, Google, it does something. And it's like, what does that mean it's doing? Let's think about this. How does it hear me? Well, it's because it's always listening. And if it's always listening and connected to the internet, how do we know that has an ethical
ethical concept in mind.
ethical consequence almost?
Yeah.
But yes.
Yeah.
It's like who decides what they look at and who gets the...
Yeah.
You remember they used to call it chatter?
Yeah.
Like there's a lot of terrorist chatter.
A lot
out there.
of chatter going
Where
on.
did you get that term chatter? Now it's like pretty obvious. They can intercept
Well,
every
because
single
they were,
phone call. Look it up again.
they were intercepting frequencies, radio chatter, things like that. If you're if you're a CB enthusiast,
If you think about it, you've never heard the
Yeah.
word chatter in over 15 years.
yeah,
After 20...
Nope.
Yeah, after 9/11.
nope, because we were
quit talking about the word chatter. Because now it's like we accept it.
we were now we are actively filtering everything to begin with.
So the
So you weren't
relationship with
catching it the way
so the
we
relationship
used
with transhumanism
Yeah.
is that we are already connected to a machine that's connected to a web that's connected to who knows how many data collection services.
Yeah, it is. It's the absolute normalization of us.
Oh, it's totally
to the
normalized.
technology.
I
And,
see people that are having dinner together and they all have their cell
I
phones.
know
out.
I've recommended it, but have you ever watched *Halt and Catch Fire*?
Not yet.
You need to.
I'm going to write it on my list. That
Number
I've been
one,
keeping.
it's one of the coolest shows that came out in the last few years. It really goes through the whole arc of the Silicon Prairie and the birth of web browsing as we know it. It's really cool. But one of the things that they talk about early in the show, of course, because they're talking about computers and their speed and things like that, is the cooling threshold and the 30 millisecond cooling threshold.
Yeah.
30 milliseconds, for those of you that don't know, folks, is a third of a second. This
No,
was...
it's a 3,000th of a second.
Yes.
right? Yeah,
You're correct. I'm sorry.
no problem.
And to conceptualize that, the idea of the cooling threshold when it comes to computers is that is where your dopamine release is. That is where the point of boredom comes. Beyond 30 milliseconds, if you're waiting for that computer to do something for more than 30 milliseconds, you get bored. Your brain actively is no longer engaged. So the more they can give you things in chunks of 30 milliseconds or less, the more you get that dopamine fix, the more you are actively addicted to the use of your computer.
I can totally empathize with that, because if you go into the center of America and you use that dial-up, you do not get the same buzz that you do from your phone running at a bazillion miles
Absolutely
an hour.
not.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
You think about that photo that you loaded, and should you turn your browser?
And
to the
even
point
as a
where it
game
doesn't load
designer,
them?
yeah.
Yeah.
What would it be if things weren't changing every 30 milliseconds?
They become incredibly boring. So
Yeah.
here's an example from many of the games
Go
I've
ahead.
worked on. You try to make it so that there's always something moving on a screen. You never leave the screen in a way that it looks like a screenshot. So even games
Yeah.
where you're in a plane or hovering in something, there's a slight edge to it. So you're moving as many pixels as possible to give somebody
Doom
the
is a
feeling.
great example of that.
Well, yeah.
Where
I mean, the
even
thing is
when
that-
you're sitting still, there's still the breathing motion
That's right.
up and down of the
and
camera.
they do that.
Even Frogger.
Yeah, everything. There's
Frogger,
always
old
something
school
moving on
8-bit
the screen.
games. There's always something scrolling by, always something dropping down.
Yeah, Frogger has things moving at different rates.
Different
which is
rates,
also
different
kind of a
directions.
buzz. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. All these little things that you pick up over the years, but when you sit back and look at it, you're like going, oh, I see. Some sort of hacking somebody's thought process and keeping them happy all the time.
Well, and
or trying to keep them happy.
it's interesting that you bring that up, because that's a lot of what the world of transhumanism is what's called biohacking. People like the scientist in Australia who chipped himself to where anytime he approached doors in the lab, he didn't have to open them. They just opened for him. Things like that.
My concern
things
about
like the filmmaker in Canada that I was talking about. That's
Right.
much more in the biohacking realm, but still within the umbrella of transhumanism.
Right. I was thinking about how advertising can work.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, they can read whether or not you're getting a buzz off of this ad.
Yeah.
And they could change that stuff out. You know, it's one thing when you're looking for something and you're like, oh, good, I saw an ad for that. You know, you get your dopamine buzz.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, if you keep seeing ads that aren't giving you that, if they have a way to read that, or you have a way to tell them that, if that's your choice,
Yeah.
then they can serve you up better ads. I mean, what? Is that good or bad? Maybe it's good because you have specific needs. You don't know where to go. Maybe it's bad because they don't just use it for advertising.
True. And that's something that you have to be aware of, is what is the technology actively being used for?
Yeah.
And I did, like I said,
I think that's part of the ethical equation. If there was an equation,
that's
that would
why
be one of the numbers.
Yeah, and I don't even know how to represent that in an equation. I am not that absolutely mathematically sound. I
But
don't
you
understand.
know it's a factor.
Oh yeah,
It has
no,
to be a factor.
it's absolutely a factor. And when you're talking about this kind of stuff, not just telepathic control of drones, and whether or not it can control somebody else, what about the fact that we are actively living in a modern matrix? You know, and one of the articles that I posted in relation to this episode was at a Telegraph UK, talking about how scientists discover how to upload knowledge to your brain. Here's an interesting clip from them talking about just that. Oh, wait, where'd it go? It isn't there. Hold on. I can bring it up.
We will play that
I
clip
thought that
as
I had
soon
it.
as possible.
I'm sorry, folks. That is absolutely my fault. Yeah.
I will
That is
say
hilarious to
it's-
me.
It is absolutely something that has been shown in popular culture. It's been talked about in books. comic books. It's like you have a person standing there and they all of a sudden download everything having to do with karate.
I mean, the movie The Matrix really brought it to life.
Yes, it did.
There were all kinds of movies about things like this. Right now, here is the audio from the video from the Telegraph UK about uploading data to your brain.
What if becoming an expert pilot were as simple as putting on a cap?
So our system is one of the first of its kind. It's a brain stimulation system. It sounds kind of sci-fi, but there's large scientific basis for the development of our system. The specific task we were looking at is piloting an aircraft, which requires a synergy of both cognitive and motor performance. When you learn something, your brain physically changes. Connections are made and strengthened in the process called neuroplasticity. And it turns out that certain functions of the brain, like speech and memory, are located within very specific regions of the brain, about the size of your pinky. What our system does is actually target those changes to specific regions in the brain as you learn. The method itself is actually quite old. In fact, the ancient Egyptians 4,000 years ago used electric fish to stimulate and reduce pain in certain areas of their head. Even Ben Franklin applied currents to his head, but the rigorous scientific investigation of these methods really started in about the early 2000s. And we're building off that research to target and personalize the stimulation in the most effective way possible. Your brain is going to be very different than my brain when we perform a task. And what we found is that in specific circumstances, the brain stimulation seems to be particularly effective at actually improving learning.
One of the aspects of learning we're most interested in is how the expert brain functions. Part of what we wanted to do when we invited expert pilots to perform our experiment with us was that we wanted to better understand what their brains look like as they're performing this very particular training that we've set up. We were hoping to modulate the brains of novice pilots who had never seen this task before in order to try to make their brain states more similar to the experts.
What that means is essentially we were able to take a group of individuals and train them to a similar level than we could without the brain stimulation. The method employed at brain stimulation relies on actual physical contact with the scalp, a head cap through conductive gel to apply the currents to the skin or the scalp of the head. It combines three modes of imaging and stimulation. One is called functional near-infrared spectroscopy. This measures the blood flow changes within the brain. The other is called electroencephalogram, EEG. This measures electrical potentials at the scalp that are indicative of brain activity within that location. And the third modality is the actual stimulation paradigm, where we can turn on or off certain regions of the brain and actually image that process in real time with those other two modalities. The idea there is to actually visualize the changes in the brain that we're inducing and that are occurring naturally. And this is kind of a way to target or personalize or adapt the stimulation to the individual in real time. What works for you as a novice might not be the same paradigm that works for the expert. The actual neurological effects can persist for hours. Those effects take days or weeks and practice to consolidate. It's the same learning mechanism. We're just amplifying it or boosting it with the stimulation.
The study showed that novice pilots demonstrated a 33% increase in skill consistency compared to those who received the sham stimulation.
Neurostimulation technology is, I consider it to still be in its infancy.
Current technology uses a simpler, non-custom interface to connect with the brain. The system designed by HRL allows for customization of the stimulation, which is key.
The field in general is very new as we understand more about the brain, and the technology that we're working with will be able to better help people, whether that be in training, in learning new skills, or improving their performance, or whether they've had a traumatic brain injury or a stroke, some disease or pathology that prevents them from having full function over their faculties. Whether we can use this technology to help those people and to help people that are simply looking to improve their performance is a question for the future and something that we're working on very closely now.
The study has been published in Frontiers in Human Neuroscience in February 2016.
Yeah. That was 2 years ago that we were talking about that kind of stuff, that we were talking about information being able to be uploaded into the human brain, that we were able to train the brain to react to certain electromagnetic pulses and electronic stimuli.
Would that fix my depression? Would it change the way that I feel? Could it make me into a different person?
Quite possibly, yes.
Questions,
yes. And I will admit, when I was a teenager, I had one of those big Eye of the Storm balls, and I used to do some crazy experiments with it. Like if you take one and put a penny on top and float your finger just above the penny, you'll actually see an arc of energy go between you and the penny. And you can write on yourself with that little arc of energy. Like you can write on stuff,
right?
All kinds of stuff.
When you get down to it, we are electricity.
Yeah, and to know that ancient Egyptians, Ben Franklin, basically used the same technology that your wife is using. They were using small, mild electric currents attached to their head to heal ailments, to help with other things. Even here next to me, I have a large quartz crystal. I've always got one nearby, but in and of itself is a receptacle of energy. It holds a frequency.
Yep. There's a big rabbit hole to go down there.
Yeah.
But it's like, even if you think, I've been, like I was telling you earlier, I've been following some thoughts on ancient Egypt. It's like, call anything that they do crazy, but then look at those stones. They are perfectly set together. That did not come a million miles rolled on sticks. And my point is that we don't know what they were doing.
Yeah.
And I think that is a fact. We just don't have any idea.
To this day, they try every few years to micro-size it as far as time and size and everything else.
Right.
And even with National Geographic, things like that, doing the best they can with scientists, engineers, they cannot, to scale in time and size, build one. They cannot build a pyramid to scale in the same amount of time to scale.
I think that just
happen.
that almost goes without saying.
Yeah.
When you look at their tolerances. Anyway, so that I digress completely, but it does have to do with other societies using technology that we are just beginning to use ourselves.
To transcend themselves, to make themselves more than what they were, be it through the use of rare earth frequencies, what have you. They were still being transhumanist in the fact that they were using something else to try and attain a new level of humanity, a new way of being. And even us with the quest of technology that we have is in and of itself a transhumanist quest. Because we are using technology to better ourselves, to further ourselves, to further not only our understanding of humanity, but our place within it.
I think that's an interesting way to look at the ethics, if you will, of the entire movement, because I think I know we're destined to get off this planet if we don't kill each other, beforehand. And I think that has.
I think it's an imperative.
And I think it has a lot to do with our biology. We want to continue to exist. Yeah. You can call it biology or ethics or whatever, but
I would say it's more of an imperative to return to our previous knowledge and get back off this planet. But that's just me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's an issue for another episode.
Yep.
And
some things are 100% rabbit holes.
With the transhumanist bent on that, it's the fact of what do we do to better ourselves with technology? How do we use technology not as a crutch, but to better ourselves?
Just thinking about we're talking a little bit about space. I mean, just thinking about the fact that people can survive in space is 100% bettering ourselves by definition, right? We're trying to learn more things about us and look back on our society, look back on our civilization, and see what we're doing. Obviously, it's not necessarily the same, but they do have claws that can do external stuff where you put your hand into it. It's like, isn't that transhumanism?
We have tactile feedback on some of that stuff now, where you can actively feel what you're touching. It's pretty remarkable.
I had a chance to try some of that stuff at South by Southwest this year, where you basically put your hand in a glove and it totally feels like you are touching things. Yeah. So there's some advances being made everywhere.
Well, and even in the world of virtual reality, the ethics behind that. What are we doing? Even in the movie The Matrix, the woman in red, like, hey, just think about the girl in red. I could arrange something if you want. Like, I programmed her. I can arrange a meeting if you want.
Yeah, that's the question. Are we alive or not? Are we thinking, or are we in a different state?
Are we actively living a holographic life? Because
is this world only happening for me?
When you actively get down to a point of quantum physics, it's the fact of the only reason why I feel you exist right now, Billy, and why I can touch this table is actively just a repulsion of electronic field.
That never actually
nothing more.
Yeah.
I'm seeing a visage of an electronic field. That's it. Are we actual matter? Does matter even exist? And that's like
boom,
a quantum philosophic conversation. Like, and that's where a lot of quantum physics comes in. Is that's really like the philosophic end of physics. What are the connections? How do we connect? Is it the fact that an AI is actively thinking, or is it the fact that it's learning through an algorithm?
Great questions.
I
mean, we already know that AI is learning. We already know that it is learning through an algorithm and algorithms that it's writing itself.
Well, and even to look at some of the AIs that have been released socially.
Fair enough.
What was the one from Microsoft that was released that was on Twitter? It was an AI on Twitter.
It was supposed to learn from what it interacted with, and that was a bad idea.
It
was a good idea.
It went racist and horrible within like 8 hours. It was supposed to have like the learning level of like a 12-year-old.
Well, let's say, for instance, that it did have that learning level, right? What does that tell you about our society?
Well, not just that, but I mean, just to go back to this last election cycle. Which don't get me wrong,
all media.
I found it as far as being a former substitute teacher, a former youth minister, a former person that dealt with age 4 to the end of high school for years. I found it disturbing some of the letters coming home from teachers about the election. Some of the things that parents were saying that their kids were afraid of, and it's like, no offense, but what the hell does your 8-year-old know about politics? Like, the only way your 8-year-old is aware of this fear is because you have instilled it in them.
I think as a parent, that's 100%. If you don't have the television on to Fear Network, whichever it is,
Fear and In.
Yeah, or Fair and Balanced.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
Whatever your flavor is,
exactly.
If that's what your children are ingesting, that's what they're going to see. I mean, a child basically knows what it sees, and I mean, I have lots of
and of
stories
course
about
the
this,
conversations that happen at home.
You're listening all the time as a child. You're hearing every little thing. You're picking up the inflection. You're understanding the anger and frustration, and if that's normalized,
you're understanding mannerisms more than anything else.
Yeah, I mean, it's just another way to be programmed.
Yeah,
I mean, you as a parent.
Oh, it's a soft programming. Absolutely,
it is. I mean, you're programming your children all the time.
The
hopefully
normalization is exactly
and that's
the term.
not just at the home, but that's out in society too.
Absolutely.
And I mean, if you think about all of that, plugging that back into that Twitter AI, I mean, what kind of world did that 12-year-old enter?
Yeah.
You know, I mean, assuming that it could read memes and make sense out of things, which of course it couldn't, but it mimicked those things.
Yeah, yeah.
And
It
that's
at least
really all
mimicked
we
the
do.
behaviors.
That's what we do as children. We
Yeah.
mimic what we see.
Yeah.
That's
No,
why your
they're-
kids are going to be amazingly
That's
funny
why
because
it's-
they know what makes you laugh.
That's why it's called in psychological terms the parroting phase.
Yeah.
My son is in the parroting phase right now. He sees mannerisms that I do and copies them.
100%, yeah.
I just posted a video of my T-Man just wrecking shop, dude. Like, he goes into the studio and he wants to get work done. He doesn't want to play with other things. He wants to go up to the computer and he wants to play with the keyboard and move the mouse and do some keyboard stuff and move the mouse.
Right.
And then he picks the mouse up and he talks to it. And I don't know why, because I don't pick the mouse up and talk to it.
And
but
who's
maybe
to tell
he
him
sees
that's not the right
maybe
thing
he
to do?
sees something coming that I don't know. But
Who's to say?
he
But the
now
fact
has a
that you-
keyboard that's all his own.
Yeah, and the fact that you let him do that and don't discourage it is its own type of programming.
Sure.
Right? So I just can't even imagine. I mean, if you think about, media in general, not just social media, we are all being fed a narrative from one side or the other, or in the middle, or
Absolutely.
whatever. It doesn't matter what it is, but you're being fed a narrative.
Yeah.
And when that narrative puts you on such a polarized side, one side or the other, it makes all those other people almost, what do you call them, like the enemy.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you think about the AI learning from what they see, if that's what we already have, what are we gonna wind up with?
Yeah. No, precisely.
Us versus you. Period.
And not only that, but if we are instilling such a horrible sense of fear into children as young as 8.
Your decisions as an adult are often politically, let's say, are done out of fear. Because it's the response that gets somebody to sit up off a couch and remember what they saw.
Well, and it's interesting that you say that, because one of the campaigns that I would actively love to start on social media is the campaign to ban all political ads. I want to ban all political ads as a form of terrorism.
Can I go further than that? I
Go
would
ahead.
like to ban
Dig, rabbit, dig.
I want to ban audiences at debates.
Interesting.
Just get rid of them.
Yeah.
Ideas will stand on their own.
Okay.
I saw a debate one time with no audience. It was the most amazing experience. It was
Yeah.
online.
There's no pretension from faces in the audience.
No, nobody applauding.
Interesting, yeah.
It was absolutely fascinating.
Wow, yeah. I could totally see that. Because it's devoid of immediate feedback. It's devoid
They don't
of
start
that,
yelling and
It's
yelling.
devoid of that cooling threshold, that immediate dopamine, this is what they want.
Yeah, exactly. It was fascinating to see that.
Ooh. I wonder if the actual networks, who are the ones who sponsor the debates.
Oh, no, this was an online debate between two people that didn't have
Precisely
any media
why
or
it
whatever.
happened that way. Yeah.
Exactly. And it was a great debate. I had my favorite person and they had theirs.
That would be interesting.
But I'm only at my house and I'm only reacting myself.
Yeah.
So I'm not getting any of that external dopamine.
Yeah, and I mean mine is banning political ads.
I'm for that too.
On the precept that they in and of themselves are terrorism, because terrorism is using fear or a message of fear to enact your political ends.
So in other words, I think what you're saying, first of all, I agree with you, because when you're selling fear, you're not selling what you're really going to do. And I think that would be a fascinating ethical question to figure out how, if you will, that
it would balance the playing field between incumbent and newcomer.
If I'm going to present my policies and no negative ads, so to speak, it's like, these are my policies. You can vote on my policies.
Exactly.
You can even go to my website
exactly.
and rank which ones are most important to you. You know what I
Precisely.
mean? It's like, why can't we have that type of democracy? And I don't mean like
instead of the fear mongering and the living off somebody's preconceived notion of what the hell of reality is going to be in a decade. You know?
Whatever your side is, if there was a poll, that would talk about what's
and
most
that
important.
that would immediately level the playing field between incumbent and newcomer as far as
You can size up their
because
policies.
that's where most money in a campaign goes to is political ads, television time, radio time.
Well, it's not about where
billboards. Once you get rid of that and bring it down totally to the message, you'd be surprised what might be able to happen.
Well, that's the thing. It's like you can see political ads right now that they don't even talk about what they have to do. I mean, not just the negative ones, but even the positive ones. You're like, well, you haven't promised anything. Yeah. But I worry that we've transgressed off the transhumanism. So
yeah, a little bit.
It's up to you.
But at the same time, AI is being used to judge this stuff.
AI is going to be. Well, actually, you know what? You're
not
right.
Not even going,
used.
dude. It is being used. I worked at conferences.
Well, just like the AI people the Amazon people like you.
Yeah.
This. I mean, they know what our choices
are. They preemptively know what our choices and preferences are.
Here's an AI thing that I learned.
Go ahead.
So I grew up on the coast, and so I've always been concerned about hurricanes. One of the articles that I'd seen years ago, and I'm sure the data still holds true, they said that Walmart can predict what a store needs before bad weather, hurricanes, etc. hit.
Oh, so I could absolutely believe that before the days of AI.
So I guess the reason that they were able to tout that was because their data showed that to them. Yeah. And so it's like, well, that means the data can show you everything else. So let's not worry about that right this second.
Yeah, that's just like raw data. You could absolutely do that like within Excel.
They can predict almost anything.
Yep.
And it is fascinating to see people take advantage of
the social trends that can be predicted, the social trends that can be manipulated. That kind of
style for fall
is. What was interesting to me was the same day that control of the internet was given to the SEC, all that kind of stuff, and that the NDAA, the NDAA was passed. Was the same day that the gold dress, blue dress situation happened on Facebook, which came to be revealed the fact that it was actually like a litmus test with the CIA and deep learning with Facebook.
I got to tell you,
that.
I did not know that, and now I am going to go look that up. And it doesn't surprise me in the slightest. I mean, we all know that distractions are what make political change happen.
That's just it. That's just it. And it was one
those side
like,
or the other.
Wow, there you have it. It's in full in action. It's so easy to sway people. It's so easy to get a grasp of what's going on socially within a realm like that.
So let's tie that back in, right? So it's like if you've got Big Brother, so to speak, if that's an easy way to describe the data situation, you can see all of that happening.
Yeah,
you can predict it, and you can take advantage of it.
Yep. Yeah,
which of course programs the people.
Not just that,
based on their machines that they're looking at.
You can actively make the trend happen.
If you think that isn't happening, come on, you know better than that. That's what happens. I mean, we've seen this over and over again, officially and in front of us. This is basically what are the colors for spring? What's going to happen in the fall? I mean, just thinking about clothing, not to mention everything else.
Yeah.
So it's a fascinating thing to think about how that's going to affect AI, how that's going to affect how we are manipulated by what we see on our phones that we carry around.
Yeah.
It's like we're already being manipulated.
Yeah.
No matter
precisely. Like the integration of man and machine has already begun. Yeah. My son is already, I'm not going to say hip deep in it, because he doesn't play with tablets or anything like that. He definitely picks up our phone and looks at it and, talks at it because he sees
limit
us.
Screen time, period.
Oh, yeah.
Of course.
No, absolutely.
You're an active parent, I can tell.
Because, good God, I wish I could limit my screen time. There's a core amount of work that must be done. And that means I can't limit my screen time, at least as of this point in life.
So you're already meshed with the machine.
Unfortunately, yeah. No, I mean
by your job.
Yeah.
Your work requires you to jack into the machine.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting concept.
Absolutely. And I explain it a lot to people. My job is the equivalent of George Jetson. George Jetson knew how Rudy the computer worked. And he had a button that reset Rudy the computer.
You mean Rosie?
No. Rosie was the maid.
You're right.
Rudy was the computer that ran Spacely Sprockets.
You know what? I haven't watched that show long enough to remember that. Yeah.
And his whole job was to know how and when to push that button to reset Rudy so that everything went right again.
Holy moly.
That was his job.
How did my childhood miss
my
that
job? My
event?
job is to understand live at a show how all of this stuff integrates together, and when it doesn't work, where these possible buttons might be to hit it to reset and make the show happen again.
And just that, and that's just the physical aspects of this.
That's just the physical aspects.
Yeah, much less the
now,
gathering of information.
Imagine it gets to the point where it is now almost with audio engineering, where engineers can walk around with a tablet. They no longer are tied to their soundboard. They can walk around with a tablet and move every fader and every knob on the soundboard and change it in aspect to the room itself. So they can walk 50 feet to the right and hear what it sounds like there, and then 50 feet to the left, as opposed to just their isolated spot in the middle of the room. So
pretty soon that'll be in VR.
The integration of that. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Drones that are doing it without anybody's knowledge or concern.
Just the other day at a conference I was working, I heard this woman ask why we couldn't get a once the room's full, can we get a drone to like fly over and take some video? And I'm like, did I really just hear that? Did I really just hear you say that you wanted to fly a drone over people's heads in a ballroom?
But think about it, right? While that is nuts due to every type of danger known to man, it's eventually going to happen. I was at an outdoor concert.
Oh, I've seen it happen.
There were like 6 drones.
I've seen it happen at barn dances I've worked. I've seen it happen.
This is a windy day.
I've seen it happen on outside events. We're talking a ballroom.
Yeah.
In the middle of a hotel.
Yeah. Drone footage, gotta have it.
No. Let's get a drone shot.
Yep. Because, I mean,
we got a 20-foot ceiling and 6-foot tall people.
Now that we're seeing the results, now that we see the results, we want it. And I think that's part of the human experience.
It is.
You're like, I've seen somebody now that can see in the ultraviolet. I think I may need to have that.
I wouldn't mind predator vision. That would be pretty cool.
There's a lot to be said for being able to see heat signatures.
Also being able to just
every game of hide and seek.
At command, that'd be dope too. The sweet predator sound, just to creep people out. But yeah, I don't know. I'm excited and yet still worried about transhumanism. I'm still trying to get beyond my fears of VR, quite honestly. And that's just me to you.
It's a concern.
Privately, I don't even know if we're still recording anymore, Billy. But if between me and you, I'm still worried about some of the concepts of VR.
You should be concerned about VR. You should be concerned about augmented reality. You should be concerned about your data being put online.
Yeah, the way that we communicate with this technology, the way that we integrate this technology with life, the way that we replace this technology with life and replace life with this technology.
And we study those events, too, to find out which ones are best.
Yeah.
It's scary.
Yeah. So,
I mean, like, even looking back and having the first calculator, that was such an event to be able to add and subtract and multiply in your hand. And that's where the road, I can't say that's where it started, but that was where the road started for a lot of people.
Well, and even to look now, just to look at the progression of technology, You're hard-pressed to find an engineering student that knows how to use a slide rule.
I actually had to use one. It was horrible. Looking up those tables and books and stuff
You're
like
right
that.
up
was
around
nuts.
my age, though. So, I mean, that was a lot of pre-computer.
Yeah.
Like, I remember shop class, like, we didn't use CAD. We did
there was
everything
no
by
CAD.
hand.
There was no such thing as CAD that you could afford.
Yeah, precisely.
Yeah, didn't exist.
So,
But
yeah.
we're seeing the benefits of all that stuff, and I think that if you think about the people that are being born now, they are starting with such a head start.
Yeah.
You know, their world is already completely connected.
Oh, I was discussing with my wife earlier today. I was like, I'm sorry. I fully intend my son to have a website by the time he's 10. Like, he will have his own income online. He'll be hosting a show
Go
or
grab
something
his
like
usernames now and get his Gmail account.
Yeah.
I did that
Right?
for my kids.
that. That is a damn good call.
Isn't that
man.
crazy?
Yeah,
Yeah, we did that for our kids.
totally. Good call. I like that. I'm
Now,
down
how
with it. That's
can you
gonna
believe
happen.
that's even a concern?
It
You know what
is.
I'm saying? So you
But-
have an online identity.
We have to craft that online identity, though. We have to make sure that it exists that way. And even now, politically, to stray a little bit from transhumanism, to look at the things that are going on politically right now with Kavanaugh and stuff like that. Like, good God, imagine we're never going to be able to elect a friggin' a justice of the Supreme Court in 15 years. It's never going to be able to happen. Like, you see all the memes about, like, you know, here's a picture of my grandmother. Here's a picture of a grandmother in 50 years. And it's like, you know, the girl with her top off at, like, Mardi Gras, stuff like that.
Oh, I think I
And-
see your point. Your point is that now that people have a record of their... So I have a different
We
opinion
have a
on
huge record of stupidity
that.
now.
I've got a different opinion.
Go ahead.
And I think that I
Because
will
you're
be...
a father, and I want you on Dads and Beer.
Yeah,
And we
I-
need to talk more regularly.
I think that my opinion will be in the minority. But
Okay.
I have this problem that I believe in the goodness of people.
Same
And I believe that this is going to be the case for so many people that it may actually break the bounds of societal concern. So, like right now, there's so many people are getting tattoos. It's not that big of a deal anymore. And I'm in the minority here. I understand, but if
Yes, but
everyone
there's
has a
still,
record
even
of
in the
their
tattoo
entire-
industry,
I
the
know.
concept of the job killer, which
Yeah.
is anything from the shoulder up.
I got no issue with that. But what I'm trying to get at is that if everyone has a social media account now, in how many years is it going to be before, dude, everyone knows what you did?
Yeah.
And I think that it's going to be interesting to see the court cases and everything else, because this is going to be happening too.
Hey, I'm not going to lie.
It's gonna be
I
happening
can't
too.
run for public office, apparently, because
No,
there's
me
some
neither.
pictures floating out there that...
I'm done. I'm finished. But think about it, right? It's going to affect affluent people first, because poor people did not have social media accounts, didn't have access to this. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the law gets written for those affluent people first. It's going to be fascinating, whatever
Well,
the case is.
The problem comes to bear, and this is what I posed to my wife earlier today, is, once again, the rabbit holes that you start going down.
Sure.
If we're going to start looking at this almost 60-year-old man's actions when he was 21 years old, and start having the FBI investigate them, then there's some actions from former presidents that we definitely need to have the FBI start going and investigating.
I got no problem with any of that. I think the issue that I fall down upon, or that occurs to me, is that, dude, just admit it. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, I drank all
Whatever.
the time as a kid.
Okay,
I
you
mean,
know what?
It'll be
You know what?
completely provable.
Billy,
30
you're
years
right.
later.
I'm going to admit it right here,
Lay it on.
right now. In Salem, Massachusetts, there's a beautiful statue of Samantha from Bewitched,
She was the best.
sitting on her broom
Right.
with the crescent moon and her hand out thusly. I hold my hand as though I am the human representation of the logo from Bewitched when it goes.
That's right.
So here's her hand out thusly. And at about 2:30 in the morning, my first time to Salem, Massachusetts, right up around Halloween, I was more than inebriated. I'd had a lot. I drank a lot during the day and at night and through the night into the wee hours of the morning.
Done that. I can't believe
However, somewhere there exists a picture of me drunk at 2:30 in the morning with my junk exposed in the hand of Samantha from Bewitched. That picture exists.
At least
it's
you got
out
a
there.
photo of it.
I'm going to say that publicly. That's out there. My son may lose sponsorships later on in life because of this. Sorry, D. That's on Dad. That's on me. Bring it back to me. We'll talk, son. But it had to be done at that moment. I really can explain it no other way. That's how my drunken brain was like, somebody needs to take a picture of this because this is the best idea in the world.
You just
and why
explained it.
they're in a thread of these images across the internet,
But
I
here's
don't
the
know.
thing. You just explained it.
I did.
And as an adult, you look back on it with a different perspective. And I think that
Kind of wish I hadn't done it, but at the same time, I'm really okay with having done it.
I've done a lot of things that I'm not exactly sure why. Or
I'm not
what's the
really
value
proud of
them.
having done it.
Yeah. But, here's the thing, right? I think that is the question that I have. And I go to
Same
that
here.
because when I first started working in gaming and we were doing things that were online and you had fans that were communicating with you, what I learned was that if you lie to the fans, you are dead.
Yeah.
But if you tell them the truth, they love you for it. So it's like, instead of saying, oh, I don't know why you guys are having problems because of blah, blah, blah.
No, because then they're in the struggle with you. They're in the struggle with you.
Yes, they will wait. They'll participate.
As nerds, they understand that there's a development here, man. There's something going on. There's a movement going on. There's something being built.
That's the good part of humanity online. It's that if somebody tells the truth, because when you actually say, you know what, I didn't know what I was doing, it was really stupid, I was ignorant, I didn't have the information, whatever, the people go, oh, all right.
And my wife shared a comedy article with me today that was like, good God, should I really rethink that fraternity membership right now? Because
I'm not going to argue.
Whether I do anything or not, the people I'm associated with are doing stuff. And
it's a fascinating question.
Like, it's, And
there's a lot of ramifications.
It happens all the time in social media, even. And you know what's funny? I've never actually had you sign. If I had a lawyer, which I don't, but if I did, if I had a lawyer, he'd be pissed that I never had you sign a release.
I think
I have a release.
I know. I think there are certain things where it's like, I'm on your show.
Oh, yeah,
That's pretty much enough of a release right there.
Yeah, I'm with you.
But I know what you mean.
But yeah, there's a legal release that says, like, I'm not responsible for anything you say. I'm not going to edit anything you say. You say something stupid that grandma would get offended by, or maybe would get your kids suspended from school because of your personal belief, or might get you fired. That is not on me. And it's crazy that we actively live in a society where we have to do that, where that actively has to exist.
I have nothing to add to that.
Because
I spent some time in England and I did something incredibly dangerous. They let us get on a bunch of machines that we probably shouldn't have been on. Basically, it was a piece of paper that we signed that said,
if we die, I don't blame you.
Yeah, if we die, it's not your fault. And
I've signed a few of those releases in life.
It was like such a short half a page thing. I wish I well, there weren't like camera phones all the time.
We print them 3 on a page so we save money. Here you go. Just sign this.
Just pull off this tab.
And it's like horrible. You can like read half of the Xerox copy.
Yeah, exactly.
Because it's like a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy. They really tore up the original.
Yeah, they did.
And had the first people sign that one.
Pretty much like the Texas homeschool guidelines.
Yeah.
That are online. There's a photo of a PDF that looks exactly like that.
Yeah,
again,
looks like
research it,
looks like the Majestic 12 documents. Not that they aren't authentic.
No, we're not saying that. It's just that's what they look like.
That's how it looks.
So it doesn't even need to be redacted.
You know,
it's so crappy.
It's just wild to go through and look at where technology has come from the 8-bit world, from the world of analog video, analog audio, to digital audio, digital video. The fact that I just got done transferring 80 gigs of movies to a SD card on my phone today.
Wow.
Because I'm getting ready for a month of uninterrupted travel. So it's like, yeah, I want some movies on my phone. So now I got like a 256 gig micro SD card in my phone with 100 gigs of movies on it.
So back to transhumanism.
Yeah.
Think about that.
Yeah.
You have an enormous external memory that you can access at any time.
Well, and like I was saying before the show, like, think about where we were.
Or a piece of information that you needed to program into your brain. I mean, isn't that kind of the same thing?
Yeah. 713-456-7128.
Why not?
You can call it, folks. I don't care. My grandmother's dead. She moved to Louisiana years ago. That is no longer her phone number. But
We're
that
back.
phone number is in my head. It's there. It's like a piece of wetware. It was put in there years ago. Up, down, left, right,
And
up, enter.
And you can't get rid of it.
That's the shortcut to levels on Shinobi. These are things that I entered into my brain years ago. Like it takes 3 years to age cheese.
Are you calling it memory cheese?
I don't know why it's in there. It's
And
still
why you
in
can't
there.
get it out.
And I can't get it out. I can't get it out. I try to make room for other things. Other things come in, and that just doesn't leave. And, you know, just to think about the way that the human memory works, the way that the human psyche works, and to know that we are now augmenting that with technology. That we are now, like, there are apps. I downloaded it not too long ago because I saw it at a conference that I worked. It's a meditative breathing app.
Yeah.
It gives you a few questions biometrically, like,
Right.
how are you feeling? How does this feel? This, that. And then it gives you a breathing exercise based on that. And it's it's wild.
I tried this VR application that was built for the military, and the idea was that you would experience something that was traumatic, and this virtual mentor would walk out and he would give you some actual physical and mental exercises.
Really?
To do. Yeah.
Ooh.
One of the ones was if you saw something, it would have, I can't remember the exact number, so I don't want to make a mistake. But basically, it's about short breathing, long breathing, and holding your breath and things like that. Because the mentor, so to speak, is using the best military information that they had. It's like, this is how you deal with psychological stress.
Yeah.
And then they taught you to go and go see a psychiatrist afterwards, psychologist and therapist. But it was incredible utilizing that software that taught me how to use my hardware and software. So it's like, here's how you breathe that will affect your software.
And you really do, just to go back to that transhumanistic concept, you really do have to start thinking about yourself as an animalistic machine. We are a thinking machine with animalistic instincts.
Built out of electricity. And the things that allow electricity
we respond to frequencies around us. We respond to frequencies of light. Our brain sees at 24 frames a second, technically, which is the rate of animation. We're really closer at 30 frames a second.
Yeah,
and
a lot of that goes back into the whole, like you were mentioning, virtual reality.
Mm-hmm.
You have to be running your simulation at an incredible compared to 24 frames a second.
Yeah,
100 plus frames a second if you can.
Yeah, you're looking at least 120 plus.
Yeah, because you have to have that person that's using it sample, so to speak, those images at 24, the correct 24
be able
frames
to parse
a second.
The brain has to be able to parse it.
Exactly.
And that's one of those that goes straight into what I used to love to study, which is subliminal psychology, things like that. The fact that at 30 hertz, you can start to entrain the brain, which is basically the same frame rate as regular television. That's why you start to get tired. That's what your brain closely sees at. 24 is true, but 30 is just enough to overload it enough to start to make it tired.
My mind right now is running a thought experiment on running at that hertz, 30 hertz. Is that correct? And then you interrupt that signal, if you will, with something that actually forces you almost subconsciously to sit forward, which is usually that fight or flight response, which is what people will sit and watch or read in social media. Yeah. And then they get that stimulus that causes that response.
Once again, 30. Like the brain just wants to operate in that frequency, whether it's the cooling threshold of a 30th of a second.
If a television could read your biometrics, and they can provide, if they can A/B test ads against you, so not the television content, like of course, Fahrenheit 451.
Why do you think things like Hulu ask you which ad experience do you want?
Well, I don't know what the data shows, but I'm pretty sure that that's something that they're experimenting.
And quite honestly, it's one of those that I've even brought up on this show. I think it may have been when you were here last time, where I am very happy as a father that want gimme is something that I'm trying to get rid of in my children.
Oh, it's so hard.
And the fact that we do not watch standard broadcast television.
I think that's
even Sesame Street and everything else is via HBO Family.
Fascinating.
Yeah. So any ad content that we're getting is utterly specific ad content. It's like, here's some insurance content. Here's a new car. Things like that.
Not gonna be
it's not. It's not the new toy.
No
bam, bam, bam.
No Captain Crunch.
It's no sugary cereal. Toy.
Thankfully, that's still
things like that. Like what's on regular television. Yeah. So as someone who sees that, it'll be quite honestly, and I hate to say it about my child, but it'll be quite honestly an interesting psychological and sociological experiment.
I have a friend that never watched television, 70s, 80s, 90s. Literally,
I know a couple
concept.
People. I know a couple people.
And my favorite, easiest story is like I can ask him, who's Gilligan from Gilligan's Island? He has no concept. And, did he really miss anything? You know what I mean? Like ultimately, he's still a human being.
He missed some societal memes.
Right, some pop culture
He missed
stuff.
some societal memes. Right. Nothing more.
Yeah, and he's basically a current pop culture like 50
if he
years
didn't watch that, then he doesn't understand what work means.
Yeah.
Because he didn't watch Dobie Gillis and he doesn't understand
talking about Willis doesn't mean anything
to
him.
It's the fact that he never saw Bob Denver in the role of, Maynard G. Krebs, the hippie slacker on Dobie Gillis.
Yeah, that's true. He did do that.
Who was afraid of work all the time. That was his big character before.
Well, it's interesting that you say that because in a sense, I only watch
I'm a Nick
so
at Night
many.
kid.
Well, no, it's not that because I don't have the same pop culture references as you. And I've noticed that with my kids because I'm like, my pop culture is dying. There's no way to say it, but it's no other way to say it. But what was pop culture to me was 100%, right?
Yeah.
And the further you get away from it, the less it is. So like the 50s are like poodle skirts.
Yeah.
You're like, I'm pretty sure there were other, cultural things
styles
happening.
of dress going on.
But it's just been distilled down. So I'm like, my pop culture's dying.
Yeah.
10 years, 20 years, 30 years.
Yeah, people remember Cyndi Lauper and Bowie. And
they'll remember
things like that.
Iron Man from Black Sabbath. But you're not going to get anything else. Anyway, so I guess that's my take on parenting and all that good stuff.
And just to bring it full circle before we wrap this episode, it does utterly relate to transhumanism because at what point do we start to surrender that part of us that is humanistic? At what point do we start to surrender that part of us that is nostalgic, that part of us that lives for nostalgia, that defines ourselves and our identity by nostalgia? And it tripped out the creator. We were talking earlier before show about the creator of Qbert.
Right.
And I think it kind of weirded him out that I was such a fan of Kubert.
Yeah, I guess.
And he was like, "Are you serious right now?" And I'm like, "I'm not even joking." Like,
it's like, dude, this Kubert is transcendental.
The sound of Kubert is ingrained in my brain, like the sound of my mother's voice being angry at me, like the smell of my grandmother's gumbo, like the smell of my grandfather's Zippo, and the sound of it lighting and opening.
Yeah, it happened at the right time.
It was one of those that any time I stepped into the arcade, I could, and I knew exactly which way to head, and I knew what was calling me. I knew what was talking to me.
For those of you that are not Kubert aficionados, what they did was they took every phonetic sound and they basically
just jammed it together.
Yeah, and then there's another aspect of the actual arcade game. They took a pinball slap, so to speak, the thing that tells you whether they call it a knock or you got to so get an extra game. Yeah. So they put that in Kubert. So when he fell off the edge, the sound kind of ran into the smack of him being on the ground, which shook the machine.
Yeah.
And if you've never experienced that, it's a whole different thing, and it drives it home.
It was so much fun. It was so much fun.
Mental, and physical
and even
experience.
now, even since interviewing him, I will admit there you go online, look for free online Kubert. It's addictive. You will get lost down a rabbit hole of just going up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right, up, down, left, right, off.
We were talking about pop culture.
Yeah.
And if you think about the concept of, where we get our idioms and where we get our anecdotes, so to speak, that we tell and we retell all the time, how many of those are eventually going to be written by AI? And different experiences.
News is already being written by AI.
Usually just sports, but yes. I was actually watching Blade Runner the other day with my daughter. She's 19.
2049 or the original?
Get a load of this. She's 19, never saw it, and I started her with the director's cut.
Nice. Extra 30 minutes.
She had some really interesting comments about the main character.
Yeah.
She was like, he's raping a robot. And I was like, I had never thought about it like that.
No, it's total Westworld.
Total
Westworld.
And it goes back to this transhumanism, which is like,
goes right back to what we were talking about with the robot brothel in Houston.
It does. And it's like,
how does that normalize you to a behavior and the expectation of said behavior from a human being?
So, she's watching it from the first time, and I'm watching it from the who knows how many times. And then she comments on that section, and all I could think about was, well, did that AI never experience, human passion or sex, or is it not capable of it? Does it not know? There was a million questions that I had, because I'm thinking about, well, how would the emotional situation be for that entity? And my daughter's like, he just raped it.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, I get it. But it's like, at some point, are these entities going to know whether they're real or not? And is it going to matter?
Once you say, and you said the magic S word. You said it. I didn't say it. You said it. Sentient.
I might as well have. Yeah.
No, you said it earlier.
I'll take that.
Once they become sentient.
What is sentient, right?
Sentient is self-aware.
Right.
That means it's aware of itself and its impact on the world around it.
The question I got is, because the AI and computer stuff goes so fast, it could be sentient and then the next second nuclear war happens. You know what I mean?
Well,
it's
because
kind of like how fast.
No, and that's the Skynet conundrum.
Because like you watch Tron, where you talk to the computer and the computer would respond.
Not just Tron, Matrix.
But between those human interactions that took minutes, they already have an answer within like a nanosecond.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, wow, that was fascinating. It's like, well, they could have already calculated
Well, that was cold and calculative, almost like I made you to do. You know what I mean?
That's always
the quandary, is that we made you to do this. Mm-hmm. Even in the great awesome work by Douglas Adams, the answer is 32. The
42.
computer, or 42.
Not that I'm a nerd.
No. but this computer was built to do all these great things, and all it did was figure out the answer to
life, the universe,
and everything that there is.
And then it was like, the problem is nobody knows the question, which is fascinating. Now, there was another aspect of Hitchhiker's Guide that I thought was absolutely fascinating, and I think this does roll back into the transhumanism, actually. So one of the starships they were flying around in had a personality, if you will. And so they wanted to get outside on this one planet, and it wouldn't let them go because it had mom personality. So they had to change its personality so they could get out the door. That's going to happen.
Oh yeah,
we're going to have these people or these AIs. They're going to be raising our children.
It was brought up in 2001. Yeah, with Hal.
Yep.
It's
made a decision for you.
It's the fact of once you entrust your children to an AI, at what point is it normalization, and at what point is it programming? Because
and who programs its morality,
and who programs what? Who's programming who? Once again, once you have telepathic control of the robot, there's no saying that the robot can't have control of you.
So if I gave, I think this will be interesting. So it's like if I gave the AI the moralities I wanted to train my kid with, and then the AI raised my kid, and then the kid decided that it wanted to enact some of those AI, who the hell taught my kid? And then the
By
AI
proxy,
can measure the performance of each one of those.
If it followed everything that you said and gave it. But that's those are some of the things that we have to worry about. Those are some of the things that we have to consider. Because
I think there have been a lot of people that have described training an AI to follow your morality.
Yeah.
And it's like, how does that AI...
Well, number one, how do you program in morality? How do you program in morality?
You would have to...
Whose concept of morality?
Exactly. And if we think about political and religious different areas, everyone has a different definition.
And that's the danger of any candidate that you hear that runs on just a concept, runs on an idea detail. Or an ideal without an actual platform. Those things you need to be careful for. And even when it comes to the world of AI, when it comes to the world of, cyborgs and transhumanism, we need to keep these ethics in mind. We need to keep these ethical concepts in mind.
I think the thing is we need to know what questions to ask.
Yeah.
And I'm not even sure there's like a top 10, let's put this against a litmus test of these top 10 things.
Well, and let's come up with that. Let's come up with that and do an episode on it, Billy.
Somebody needs to.
Because, quite honestly, especially doing what you do with Radical Empathy Education Foundation and the work with human trafficking, things like that, it's right up along the same metric.
It's true. We're actually running a study pretty soon with Clemson University.
Okay.
Where they're going to try to determine whether our VR application versus a text description or a PowerPoint description of the material, which one works best, why it works best.
Which one translates the message best.
And some of it is going to be factual information, and some of it is going to be, can we change people's perspectives?
Yeah.
So I'm really excited about running that test. But as you point out, this is something where, if this works, that means I can program people.
Yeah.
So isn't that a weird ethical thing? So it's like, you know what I'm saying? And so I want to do the best that I can and use the best data
you can
to
at least
them.
I wouldn't necessarily say program, but you can at the very least affect, not effect, but affect.
I think you're right.
Their social understanding of behavior.
I totally understand what you're saying, and let me tell you why I think that's important, and why my thoughts on this may be a little bit different, or maybe you haven't kind of heard them, right? So, one, you're absolutely right that we have to educate people about certain things.
Yeah.
And the question is, which one of those things are right? And so what we've tried to do is consolidate information from a lot of different places to put in front of them. And then we want to measure whether somebody remembers that after a certain period of time, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, if we do a good job, our assumption, that they'll remember it, and the data that we're trying to get them to recall, if those are good, then we've done a good job. And if we didn't do a good job, and we stank on one of those things, we're going to find out that we didn't. And I would say that it's easy to think about that because it's A/B testing, like in a video game.
Sure.
Did this work? And in gaming, we generally look at, did this make me any money?
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, so the fact is,
was this interactive enough to engage the player?
Right. So I can look at each one and I go, okay, well, this one worked, this one didn't. So I'm going to go back and change the ones that didn't work in ways that match the ones that did.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to guess what will get something across. But I mean, the onus, I guess, in a lot of ways is, who decides what I'm supposed to be teaching them?
Yeah.
And that's a question that doesn't have a clear answer yet. So like I said, I'm trying to take things that are kind of an amalgamation of the best information I can get. And of course, this is the same thing as any teacher does. But essentially, I'm creating AI
could be doing
role-playing situation. Right. I'm creating a consistent role-playing situation that can be measured. So is it good or bad or whatever? I mean, I'm hoping it's good because I'm going to provide all this information. All of our study stuff is going to be made public.
Yeah.
So the idea is that we're going to try to advance this research and make a difference at the same time. And if apparently we're not following the best rules or things change, we can go back and make those adjustments.
Yeah. And all of that is, absolutely quantifiable study.
It's numbers at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I mean, we're trying to save people's lives, but ultimately you measure that by using numbers, and you have quantifiable metrics that are, key performance indicators, all these other wonderful words that basically means, does this work or not?
Yeah. And the same metric can be followed with man with machine, man married with machine. All of this stuff is absolutely metriced out.
All these measurable items.
We follow all of the same study tools that
it's already working in Facebook ads. It's working in Google ads. It's working in the timeline. They're looking to find out what you like. How do you give you the best dopamine? It's already happening. So my challenge is to harness that in a way that's good for the universe.
Absolutely. I would say that is precisely what Dudes and Beer is all about, is to do the same thing.
I agree.
To try and explain to people that there is a way to channel that into good, positive things, that there is a way to expand your knowledge, to expand your realm of understanding.
Even if that means learning how to do some research online. Find out if we're right or wrong.
Well, that's just it. Be willing to explore it. Be willing to look it up. Be willing to search it.
The cool
I'm
thing
not afraid to admit when I am wrong. Feel free to prove me wrong.
When we started tonight's show,
I challenge you to prove me wrong.
I can't, but I'll tell you that tonight during our gig, I think differently about the way Yale made those decisions to shut those classes off. I mean, there's so many ways to look at that. Was it a political ploy? Was it a way to get some better enrollment from, who knows what it was? But I find it heavy-handed. And now I question my initial reaction, which is that's a good thing. And now I'm like going, I got to think about those other people, which is which is really the point of what my organization is doing, is trying to get you to see something from someone else's point of view.
Yeah.
And I want to be open to those different points of views, like yourself, or even just things that you point out that other people have thought about.
Absolutely.
I'm not married to my ideas.
Well,
and that's a big
I think that as we wrap things up, I think that's where we should do another episode, quite honestly. Mm-hmm. Especially as somebody that works in the field of game programming, computer programming, things like that, is the concept of the religion of science. And the fact of scientists hate to be proven wrong. They hate to think that
Not real scientists.
the concept of what they based their entire theories on for years may be called into question.
Confirmation bias and everything else.
Confirmation bias.
I've decided this study needs to give me this result. Therefore, I will design the study to match that result.
Yeah, and it's a real issue. It's a real issue even in the computer world.
You know, if you don't mind me, I know we are winding up and everything. But that's the thing I'm working on right now with Clemson as far as our study. It's trying to figure out what is it they're trying to measure, and then how do you measure it, and how do you stay as objective as possible so you're not feeding them the answer. Like if you had a questionnaire and you want every answer to be true, how do you write that? Well, you write it so that it's really hard to disagree, right? And so that's a super important way to design this thing, and I want it to be right. And so I want to make sure that we go back and forth until it seems like the right people have looked at it. Because I don't. The only reason I care about the results is so I can improve them.
Yeah,
why fool myself into believing that what I've created works if it doesn't?
Well, and we have to figure out as a society why what we've created isn't working in the ways that we need it to work.
Can't agree more.
And we need to be ready to get rid of that confirmation bias and understand that we may not get the expected result out of the social experiment, that we may not have these answers. And when it comes to transhumanism and what we're doing ethically to answer those questions, what we're doing scientifically and technologically to answer those questions, I think we have really placed ourselves in a true space of creation, where we understand a lot of the impact that could come from things. Because even as it's stated there on the website, they take into consideration the concept of what the ethical quandaries might be.
Right.
I think the issue is, what do we do about studies that are looking to expand the definition of death? That are looking to change the definition of death.
Dude, I have so many questions about that. Let's say you have somebody, just one quick one. Let's say that I've got your brain.
It's an episode in and of itself.
You're on my phone, right? What if my battery dies? Did I just kill you? You see what I'm saying? What is that?
How much RAM do you need to back up a soul?
Oh my God.
These questions and more in future episodes of the Dudes and Beer podcast.
They're going to happen.
Absolutely. And as always, Billy, thank you so much for coming on. Tell everybody where they can go to check out the great work of the Radical Empathy Education Foundation.
We are
#Reef Cares.
We are at Reef Cares on every social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, you name it. So welcome, guys, RadicalEmpathyFoundation.org.
And and thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Dudes and Beer Podcast.
If you can't be good,
to listen to our audio streams or chat with us live, download the official Dudes and Beer app for Android and iDevices, available on Google Play and iTunes markets. For more episodes, content, and information, visit us online at dudesandbeer.com. You can also find our episodes on Breach.tv, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, SoundCloud, iTunes, YouTube, Stitcher, or your favorite podcast service. Dudes and Beer is a proud member of the HC Universal Network family of podcasts. For more about our sponsors and other podcasts on this network, visit hcuniversalnetwork.com. Thanks for listening, everybody, and until next time, drink responsibly.